Hey there, everybody. Zach Burley here with episode 3, the March through April turn of 1943 of my Empire of the Sun playthrough. Been a little while since I've filmed this in real time, so just to get you back into it, currently the political will track sits at 5 over here in the corner, and the U.S. is starting to roll into their offense here, really getting a lot of the big ships on the board and building up their fleet. They've taken some setbacks, but they're starting to turn things in the CBI, starting to turn things in the Solomons, but it's going to be a hard nut to crack. Let's go ahead and show you the hands for the two sides. Interesting for both, and it'll provide some stuff that I haven't seen yet in this game. So, new operation plan. This gives the bonus, a defensive bonus for one hex islands. The submarine, basically the aircraft submarines. This won't really do much because it's already delayed, so I think this one's kind of useless, but would have been better earlier. They have a reaction card for a counterattack Savo Island. Then a couple of military event cards. They have Operation IGO, which will be interesting. We'll see how they utilize that. And these next two are kind of odd that these came out. The First Convoy Escort Fleet and the Grand Escort Command. So these are both provide that escort bonus. They'll be able to get it all the way up to 4. But those are the only 2 military event cards in this whole hand besides this card that only allows you to do air combat. So, that's interesting. And this is the biggest one for them, though, is Imperial Intervention. They've been an ISR for basically the majority of the last 2 turns, and it's really hindered them a lot and made it difficult, especially with reaction and stuff like that. So being able to get out of ISR will be huge. They also have this ground combat card that they saved, which will be good for this turn when they're low on them for an offensive in the CBI, because they've loaded up some guys there and they're looking to make a comeback and really push away at the allies in that area. So let's get you the allied hand that'll be going first. This is an interesting hand because it is all military event cards. So last turn we missed the progress of war out of sheer incompetence. This should be no problem this time. So we got U.S. carrier raids, surprise attack will be good. MacArthur's moral obligation. So this one is interesting because we already have Operation King 2 down in the future operations queue. So that's 2 Philippines cards, so maybe we save these for last, hope to build up and get a good launching point in New Guinea, and then maybe go for it here. You just have to worry about overextending your supply lines and that sort of thing. But if this goes really well, it's certainly an option. Otherwise, we probably play one of these for just the points and then save either Operation King or MacArthur for otherwise. But the Burma offensive, that's nice to have the British armored unit as a little to shore up or maybe to use offensively. Operation Romulus, yet another SEAC event. So you're saying it's a well-balanced military event hand. Some Anzac surprise attack, which will be nice because the 3rd New Zealand Division, I believe, 3rd New Zealand Division is poised to make an attack, so that's a useful card. And Operation Square Peg, same thing. Interesting that we get the 3rd New Zealand, so they actually could be seeing a lot of action this turn. And then Operation Flintlock, which I'm imagining will be used for maybe something in this area. There's a couple of 1-hex areas that could be really useful for as a mock of the Marshall Island invasions. So that does it, but this hand is, you're saying, there's advantages and disadvantages to having an entirely military event hand, but the good thing about it is it's really well balanced. You have the surprise attack carrier raids. This gives you some flexibility, maybe of doing something in the Philippines. 2 cards that are going to be used for CBI, 2 cards that are specialized for the Anzac, and then a good all-arounder. So odd card, but odd hand, but it's still, I would say, probably one of the best hands that you could get as far as having all military events. So we'll roll through these hands and bring them to you as they become necessary to do so. Alright, so I'm going to lead off. The U.S., of course, have the initiative from here on out. They're going to lead off with U.S. carrier raids, so they get a logistics value of 0, Central Pacific only, so they're going to be activating up here, and they have plenty of range to reach, I think it's Einwetok where they are. Nope, they're not in Einwetok, they are in Kwajalein, excuse me. Plenty of range to reach there, and they'll be attacking down here. I think this is a good lead off. That way the rest of the operations that are going to be run this turn will have less possible air support from these Japanese carriers that are actually low from my mistake earlier. So it'll be, that's the one thing I wish this card would have come just a turn later, because the U.S. still has 4 or 5 carriers down in the delayed reinforcements box. Those carriers really don't. The only one they have actually is the San Jacinto down in the Solomons. So really they wanted another turn to do this, but I didn't really want to put it in the future operations card queue, just because that I would have to play the card that's in there for. I just didn't want to have to do that. So I'm gonna just do this. What will be a smaller strike? It's gonna be the Enterprise and the Lexington. And by the way, I got these new, whatever you call them, tweezers or tongs or whatever. So that, like a weird doctor, it kind of felt weird about ordering these online because it's just an unusual purchase. I have another one that I'm using with some bent ends for my Paths of Glory playthrough. So I'm going to try and plastidip these ends to make them a little less sharp. These are rounded, but these are working great. They're 10-inch. Actually used for cooking, so like you could flip steaks and stuff. I'm on a tangent, but if you are looking for some, I recommend these. They were actually cooking tweezers, 10-inch, and they work really well for the GMT style counter. So I'm still getting used to it a bit, but I'm definitely better with these than I am with my fingers, which obviously I'm not showing that off right now. So we'll take the HQ out of the picture. We'll have the biggest reason I wanted to do this is because all my videos, my hands are always covering up everything that's going on. So, I mean, half the videos you spent looking at the back of my hand. So I wanted to be able to kind of move my hand out of the way and make it a little more visible. So in Truk, the Japanese carrier fleet is the Tenru, the Akagi, the Shikaku, and the Soryu. That comes up to a combined strength of 30, I believe. I just did the math a second ago. And the Americans will be attacking with 24. Now, this is a surprise attack, and it can't be altered by a card or canceled by weather. So, I've been corrected on this before, that in the surprise attacks, the attackers get to fire first, and then the defenders will respond. I'll have to check if, because in Paths of Glory, that's the one thing about playing these simultaneously, is the rules are slightly different. In that one, if you do a flanking attack, the attackers fire first and then the defenders fire, but something's telling me for some reason in this game the attackers fire and then they both fire afterwards. I'll look that up, but I'll go ahead and do this this roll here. It's going to be 24. I'll set the Japanese dice aside and get out my air naval combat table. Let's get a roll on here, and it's going to be a 6. So it'll be a surprise attack. Let's show it to you here. It's a surprise attack, so I'll get a +3. So it's going to be a 9 +1 for it being in 1943, where aircraft carriers are located. So it's going to be a +4, which puts it up to 10 or more, which will be a straight up 1. So they're going to do 24 points of damage. They'll have to reduce the Soryu first, which is not a problem. That's what they wanted to do anyways. And that'll leave them with another 12. They're going to go ahead and eliminate the Shikaku, which will go to the eliminated stack. It is gone. Now I'm going to go and check really quickly about whether the defenders fire or whether they fire both back simultaneously. Be right back. Yep, I was wrong. So now the defenders will get to add up their total remaining strength and fire back. So it'll be 15 and 3. 18. 18 will be returning fire. And let's get a roll on here. Ooh, yikes. A 0 for the Japanese, and that'll be a quarter result of 18. Sorry, I'd already forgotten what I had said. 18 a quarter, that'll be 5, which is nothing. So, I mean, a perfectly executed carrier raid. Go in and completely annihilate what's left of this fleet. Now you're saying you're operating with a whole group, a whole carrier, first of all, less than you had earlier. But, you know, it's just a lot not going well here. And like I said, the biggest reason I wanted to do that as the Americans was, or as the Allies, was to reduce the amount of possible support that the Japanese could bring in on these attacks, especially down in the Solomons, where I imagine quite a bit will be going on. The Americans were just going to post-battle movement back to Kwajalein. So, you know, that's going to definitely shift the balance here in the Solomons, because now, with so little factors, when the Allies come in out of Guadalcanal, it'll make it a little more difficult to decide, even for the Japanese, if they want to bring the fleet there in, because it's pretty useless. But this also could mean that if we look up here to the Indian Ocean, they still sit in Ceylon uncontested. They're keeping the British Navy pinned in at the moment, so they're gonna have to debate whether they want to bring these guys back around, which will open up the Indian Ocean again. And this front is already kind of turning against them. So pulling out the Navy, allowing the British Navy to come out, is a risky move. But if they decide that the front down in the Solomons is more important, or that even the U.S. now with an even better even playing field may just straight up attack. I mean, they have I think maybe North Carolina and Massachusetts, maybe, I forget. But they have some other battleships here that they can just bring in for a straight up attack. So, if they lose all of their ships in that area, then it's just, they're going to get walked over. It's going to be defending hex to hex. Plus, the route back to Japan is very poorly defended. So I'll have to, as the Japanese kind of reposition some forces to guard this train back. Otherwise, they're just going to march right in, eliminate the forces in Truk, and then cut off supply to the home islands. So the Japanese teetering here on the verge of disaster. So they're going to have to be careful, reposition some forces, and make a big decision here on this turn. Okay, so the Japanese played the Imperial Intervention card to end ISR. They've been in it for like 2 full turns, so that's good for them. The U.S. then played the MacArthur Moral Obligation card for the ops points. They have Operation King 2 over in the future operations queue, so they can't do both. I mean, they probably won't even get to do King this turn, but they'll have it for later, obviously, the future offensives queue. So they went ahead and used it for the ops to launch this the attack they've been wanting to do. They used Anzac, and someone reminded me last turn that I was attacking using this Australian core, I believe, while not activating it from the what is it called? Joint. That's it. Joint Command. Joint HQ. So I did use this this time. Got 4 activations, of which we have the ground unit, the North Carolina and the San Jacinto, and then the 11th Air Force, which is going to be doing a pinning attack on Leh, I think that is. It's covered up. The Japanese rolled for reaction. Well, actually, no, they didn't, because they played counterattack. So this allows them to... They had it in their hand. They just didn't think there'd probably be a better time to use it. The debate they had was whether or not it says you can use air or naval units. The debate was maybe to bring down these for the attack, to just try and do not one last stand, but I don't think that the Allies thought that this was going to be much of a stand. I think they kind of came in thinking, well, there's not going to be much resistance because they're going to try and play more defensive. But, to bring in one to hit them maybe when they weren't expecting it. So, because it gives them a +2 to the strength of CA, CL, and ADP, which would have given them a +2 on the Tenru here. In Truk, they decided not to, though, because if things went badly, then the next turn, Japanese would just come right into the Truk. So they're going to hold off on that until they can decide what they're going to do with the Navy. So they decided to bring in these 2 air units. One was in Hollandia. One was in Wewak. That's it. The other was in Wewak. And that will bring up their total strength for the air naval up to 32. And that'll bring the Allies to 26 due to the North Carolina and the San Jacinto. So the pitting attack we'll go ahead and do first. It's going to be 10 of the 11th Air Force, and then it is the 51st Air Flotilla and the 7th Air Division. So it'll be 10 and 12. 10 and 12 is what it'll be. Go ahead and roll it up, and it's double 4s. 4s for either side, so that'll be on the 1/2. There is, as far as I know, no modifiers. So it'll be a half result for both sides, which will not be enough to do anything. So the Americans get what they want, just a stalemate. They probably would have taken a step loss for a step loss there. They're happy to trade air power. But now on to the main event. 26 and 32 is the numbers here. 32 and 26. All right, so low numbers, which won't be too big of a deal because this is not amphibious invasion. It'll be a 2 and a 3 on the combat results table. A 2 for the Japanese. Oh, sorry, we're still over here. Air results. The 2 will get them a quarter. The 3 is a half. The U.S. will get a +1 for the carrier, which takes them up to 4, which is not going to change the die roll any. So it'll be a quarter of 32, which is 8. Ooh, there it is, 8. And just taking a quick look, that's not going to be enough to damage anything. And then a half result for 26 is going to be 13, which will be enough. And I've still got to get used to using these things. I keep trying to go with my hand. They can't take down the kamikaze yet because it's not everything's reduced. They're going to go ahead and hit the 50th Air Flotilla for 10. The other 3 will be lost. So I believe that the Japanese only took, well, they could have hit these over here. They're still going to go with the one they did. So it was a victory in the attack here. I can't actually do post-battle movement yet. A victory in the air and at sea. So the ground combat continues. It would have continued either way. So let's go ahead and get a zoom in here on the situation in the Solomons. So it'll be a ground attack, which is helpful. And it'll be 12 against 9, I believe. Let's go ahead and move these guys off for a second. It'll be 12 against 9. We'll get a roll. And that'll be a 4 and a 3. I'm a 4 and a 3 over here on the ground combat result table now. 4 and 3 both fall under that 1 category. For the Allies, this does not apply. It is a mixed hex, so it'll be -2. Off of that, we'll bring it down to 2. And if they are the only ones, which they do not, which is not good, and event modifier, there is none, so actually brings them down to a measly 2. For the Japanese, they're at 3. They get no bonuses. So 2 and 3. That'll be a half result. Half of 12 is just going to be 6, not enough. And 3 is a 1 result of 9, which is also not enough. So this one goes down. This is like the second or third time they've tried to take Rabaul by ground, and has failed every time. But in the end, the U.S. doesn't take any step losses anywhere, and the Japanese take an air step loss. So in the end, it's still successful. So now we can conduct post-battle movement, and everybody's going to go back to from whence they came, pretty much. These two units will go back to Hollandia and Wewak. And those two guys will slide back into Guadalcanal. So, still no progress, but the Americans do have the two cards that are used for the activation of the 3rd New Zealand that are on surprise attack. So with the Americans, obviously the Allies don't know this, but that was the only reaction card, the one they played for this one, the counterattack, is the only reaction card they had. So they won't be able to stop either of those surprise attacks. So they may be able to get into Guadalcanal. Of course, they have to keep an eye on the progress of war. So over to the Japanese now. All right, welcome back. The Japanese, on their turn, they drew another card because when they played that counteroffensive card, they got draw, and they drew Chinese Army Navy Central Agreement. They really could have used this a while ago. Went ahead and played it to reposition some forces around for an advance in CBI. And so now the U.S. has said, oh, well, you're not going to shore up your South Pacific holdings, well, Central Pacific holdings. We're going to punish you for that. So, honestly, as the Japanese player, there's no way that you could know that the entire U.S. hand is going to be military operations. So, from that perspective, playing it solo, it's like you can't possibly think that their only objective this turn is just attack when there has to be some limitations by the cards, you would think. So this will be good Operation Flintlock, because they obviously have to get that progress of war up to 4, and they're hoping to start it off here with this attack into Truk here, trying to wipe out the South Seas HQ, which, it was a dumb idea to leave it as defenseless as it is right now. Because I can't imagine they hold out. I really can't. Because there's not even any ground forces. So South Seas will be gone, which means that everybody's going to be out of supply down here, which is going to pretty much mean the collapse of the southern front for the Japanese. Now, I think, I'll double check this, but I think that you can play a card to bring an HQ back into play, which is what they're going to have to do. There's no other option. They're going to have to find a way to mitigate this, otherwise they're done for. So, the attack here is quite extensive. We got 11 activations because we're using Central Pacific. 8 and 3 is 11, last time I checked. So, it's going to consist of pretty much the entire U.S. Navy. It's going to be the Lexington, the Enterprise, and the San Jacinto. Those are the CVs. Then the battleships will be the Mississippi, the Massachusetts, the North Carolina, and the Washington. They also went ahead and picked up the Marine Brigade from Wake Island. They could have used the one that took Kwajalein, but since it's undefended, I thought it would be more poetic to use the one from Wake. Now, if the Japanese decide to counterattack, which I can't imagine, they don't have the strength to do it, but I thought it would be pretty poetic to bring the Wake Island defenders back. I think they should actually be reduced. No, I shouldn't. Bring the Wake Island defenders back and do this attack. The Japanese are going to defend with the rest of their fleet. They have the ability to react, but they have the 2nd Air Division in Palau. But it can't. That's the thing about Truk, is it's so isolated. The only other island that's it's not even within striking distance for units like the air divisions. The air flotillas could probably reach, but there are none within range that could get there. So there is no helping. They're just one. activation shy of reaching Combined Fleet. Combined Fleet's only one away from reaching them. Well, I guess, yeah, they're one away from reaching them, so they can't activate. I don't think South Seas can activate because they're not within activation range. Like it goes these hexes here, so I don't think that the Yamamoto and the Nagato can be activated to come and help. So they're just left on their own, pretty much out for slaughter, and it's gonna be a slaughter. Even with the Yamamoto and the Nagato, it would be terrible, anyways. The attack also consists of 3 pinning attacks, just to mitigate, just to try and reduce the amount of forces that are going to be here. Plus, this is nice to help try and reduce some of the air in New Guinea and what's left of the holdings in the Solomon. So we'll go ahead and roll these out, starting with the 3 pinning attacks. We'll go with the one in Lay or Wewak. Wewak. Got it wrong again. So it's going to be 10 versus 8. None of these are going to be surprise. The roll is double 2s. For the air attack on Wewak, which is probably going to result in nothing. It's going to be a quarter on the air naval. 2 either way. There's no pluses or minuses. Nope. So a quarter of either of those numbers doesn't result in anything. So that's done. The next one, double 2s again. Same result, I believe, because there actually may be, yeah, it's going to be actually 12, but a quarter of 12 still isn't enough. And then the last one, let's see if we can roll something else. 3-0, which is equally as bad, pretty much. That'll be a half and a quarter, but I believe they only have 8 here. Yeah, it's 8. So half of 8 is only 4. So all 3 of those attacks, the U.S. would have liked to have done some damage, but they're not too disappointed, honestly. Now for the main event, let's get you zoomed in for this one. Alright, so it's going to be 97. Yeah, 97 against 18, so an equal result, right? Let's go ahead and get the rolls on here. Ouch, 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 ouch. 9 and a 7. So it's all gone. These are all done for. 97 easily takes care of the remaining Japanese units. The Pacific Fleet's done. It's gone. It's been eliminated, which is detrimental. In return, though, they'll do on 7, which is a 1. That'll be at 18. There's modifiers too. If I can get it in here, what we just did, but with a 9, it would be modified over. You can do the math there. It would go over. But the 7 will be a 1, which will do 18. So they can decide how they go about that. It's kind of a tough one because these are the stronger units, but these are obviously more valuable to hit. They're gonna strike the Lexington. So the Lexington will take a hit. They don't have enough to hit anything else, which means that the Marines can land easily into Truk. If I grab a control marker, can land easily into Truk, which will send the HQ over to the track, and now we can do post-battle movement. The Air Force is going to go back to this place. I'll get eventually all of these. Buna, that's it. They'll go back to Buna. This will go back to Port Moresby. If I can get a hold of these here. And then these here. They'll move in the Lexington, the Enterprise. They got a 6 limit stacking, so one of these can't be here, but they'll leave the North Carolina, as it was historically with the Enterprise. Being from North Carolina, I've been on this boat multiple times. It's got a special connection. They'll leave the Mississippi, I think, as well. These other 3, the Washington, the Massachusetts, and the San Jacinto, will go back to Bougainville. Let's see if we can grab all of these. Oh, yes, we can. Alright, so obviously not great. That'll give the U.S. 1 of their progress of war for the turn. So a pretty poor result there, but the one thing that I want to say first off is a thank you to somebody on BGG who reminded me about the stacking limits over here. So originally he pointed out that Rangoon was overstacked, and that is correct. This can be taken off, so it's not quite as confusing. I thought it was 3 ground and 3 air, so you could have a total of 6 in a space, but it's 3 and or, which makes things a little complicated. So I went ahead and redistributed one of the air units just as a mistake on my part, but the rest of them, since then, I've been moving them, by cards around, and I'll make sure to get that stacking limit right from now on. So thank you to everybody for keeping me straight on things that I didn't even know I was getting wrong. I really appreciate that. So now the Japanese, the remainder of their hand is the 2 escort cards, IGO, and these 2 resource events, the submarine attacks and the new operation plan. So, I mean, these 2 are basically, you give you 2 logistics values, so I don't really know what they're going to do with that. The air offensive, this would have been nice earlier, but right now it's like I don't really want to waste my air. Might try and soften up the CBI, but the big one, just so you know what they're planning to do here, is their card in the future operations queue. They're sizing up for this jungle warfare attack, and they're just getting the units in place. So by the end of the turn, they're gearing up for a big time attack on the CBI that will hopefully reduce a lot of what's gone bad for them. Now, I'll check in the rules, but I think that one of these cards maybe have to use to bring back that HQ. But over to the Japanese now. Alright, so a few turns along here, the Japanese played the Grand Escort Command to reinforce the supply lines back to the home islands. With Truk falling, things are pretty desperate in the South Pacific, or in the area of the mandates. So by securing Iwo Jima and Saipan, they're going to also have to get probably Palau as well, or Ulithi, to chain these together and be able to reconnect the South Pacific with supplies, because as it stands they are out, so they're still scrambling in this area. But the U.S. are going to respond with Operation Romulus, which will be up in the CBI, and they looked at it and they said this is a good opportunity to strike because the Japanese are kind of weak. And then when they lined everything up, it came out that yes, the ground attack is going to be pretty overwhelming, but the actual air naval combat is going to be pretty one-sided. The only question I had about this is, I'm assuming is what it means here, if I can get it in the shot. It says only Commonwealth and Chinese units plus U.S. air, so I'm assuming that means Commonwealth naval and air can also be used. I'm assuming that's what unit means. I can go and look it up, but I could be wrong if they're activating this. So what does the attack consist of? The attack consists of SEAC, as well as a bomber unit in Mandalay, also with SEAC, and as well as the 3rd, the 15th and the 33rd Indian Corps, supported by the Warspite. They're going to be attacking Rangoon, which has the 4th Air Division, supported by the Junio, and the Congo making their last stand out of Ceylon, and the 5th Air Flotilla. So it's not a surprise attack, by the way. The Allies were hoping for that because it's only a 4 on the event card, plus the 2 gives you a 6, so there was some leeway in there that they might be able to get surprise attack out of this one. They did not. But it's going to be 55 against 28, so pretty lopsided in favor of the Japanese. So they'll roll together for this. And we have a bad roll for the Japanese. Just about everything has gone wrong for them since the good early start. It's going to be 5-1. So on the air naval, 5 is a 1/2, a 1 is a 1/4. The die roll modifiers are nil because there's no aircraft, any U.S. air or aircraft. Okay, so still a no because there's no U.S. air. So it's still 5-1, no problem. So half of 28 is going to be 14, which will be enough to get rid of the Congo, which is probably what they'll do. They could hit one of those air units. Oh, no, they can't because those aren't reduced. So it'll be 14, and then the Japanese on a quarter of 55 will get 14 themselves. How poetic. So we'll deal out this damage. 14, tempting to hit the Warspite, but I'm thinking it's probably better to hit one of these air units, only because these battles along in the south are probably going to be determined more by air than they are by naval force. The only thing is you waste 4 if you don't hit the Warspite. Let me just check here. Yeah, that one's 10 as well. They're going to hit the Warspite for 14 straight up, and the Japanese are going to hit the air flotilla. The air division. So now the ground combat commences, and it's going to be 36 against 18 in favor of the Allies. So it's the 17th and 28th, Army, and constitutes 8. And then we have 20 and a 16, which is 36, of course. So they will roll for this, and there will be some modifiers to this combat. Alright, a little bit better. For the Japanese, at least. 5 and a 3, which will become the ground combat table results. We'll go 5 and a 3, both fall under the same. But they're attacking into a mixed hex, I believe. No, it's a jungle hex. So that's a -1, which brings them down to a 4. Still leaves them in here. And they are not the only that have naval. And they are not getting this one either. So it's going to be both getting a 1 result. Which in the end is better for the British than it is for the Japanese. So they'll deal 36, which this is 12 and 24. It'll completely wipe out the Japanese ground. And then they will do in return 18, which is just enough to reduce one of these Indians. So it'll recapture Rangoon. And Burma never fell. So that'll push the progress of war up to 2. And I'll just mark that there to remember. They'll slide in. And strategic, I've already forgotten what it's called by now. Repositioning, strategic, it'll come to me eventually. Redeployment, I think, strategic redeployment. post-battle movement. Jeez. Took me a second. They'll conduct post-battle movement, and I think the Japanese are going to move now to the south and abandon Ceylon, because there's just no reason to continue to hold it, especially now that they can't support Rangoon. Everything is going to be on the other side, so they're actually going to come down just to Singapore. And then the units move in here, and the British will slide in their air. The war spy will go back, and I'll have to make sure that's not overstacked, because I think it is. I think it's overstacked by 1. So they'll leave this unit here, and they'll have to do an emergency movement away, and they'll go back to Vietnam. And now the Allies have been able to push back in the CBI sufficiently to knock the Japanese out of Burma, which puts their resources now down, and I'll recount this just to be sure, to 12 the resources for the Japanese. And it's kind of been coming. That's the thing, is whenever I've played the Japanese, I've had a really bad start all across the map, and so then I'm at this time still fighting in Indonesia, and haven't really pressed in this area, so I've never really gotten to the point where you're supposed to be defending. And as it's rather obvious, I'm doing a poor job of it. The South Pacific is in shambles, but the bigger loss is Truk. So the Japanese are going to have to do something, or, you know, they're at 5 on the political will, so maybe there's something they can do. Just keep trying to slow down this advance, but as it stands, not looking too good. Okay, so the Japanese played new operation plan to help shore up their defense of the islands, the One Hex Islands. The U.S. have 2 cards left in their hand, and they have 2 progressive war points they need to pick up. Interestingly enough, they're still both the 3rd New Zealand Division cards, so they're both surprise attack. The first one is used to move into New Georgia, and then I'm going to use the remaining points to do a attack on Rabaul, and it's just going to be air naval. No, because obviously I can't activate any other ground units, but it'll be a surprise attack, and then I'll probably use the second one to do a ground invasion supported, because that one will be a surprise attack as well. So let's zoom in for this initial just air naval combat. It's going to consist of the Enterprise and the Lexington and the North Carolina and the Mississippi, and defending the Kamikaze, the 4th Air Division, I believe. Sometimes I get the 6th Air Division and the 50th Air Flotilla. Got to keep the numbers straight on there. So defending, it's going to be 12, and attacking is going to be, if I can do the math here, 16, 28, and 36, 51 total. So 51 against 12, but more than likely the Japanese won't even get to roll, because I've gotten this wrong in the past, but I've been corrected. The surprise attack, the person surprising does the roll first, so lovely. To 2. So one thing about games that I've played with dice is I have a very a tendency to roll low numbers. So on the air naval combat, a 2 is a quarter. They will get a plus 1 for, well, they get a lot actually. 3 for the surprise attack, if I can actually show you this here. 3 for the surprise attack, 1 for that. So plus 4 total, which will bring them up to 6. 6 is going to be in the 1 category, which is enough to shatter the fleet and not even give the Japanese time to fire back. So the Kamikaze goes back in the box, and these 2 go in the possible to be replenished box, but I can't imagine. Well, It's very unlikely that they're going to be coming back. So the air raid goes very well, and we will hold on to these just for a second, because most likely the Americans will be doing another attack here after the Japanese play. All right, after much debate, I've decided to go ahead with Operation Square Peg, which is going to be the naval invasion of Rabaul using the very heroic 3rd New Zealand Division. And the reason I debated this a lot is because this is the one last point that I need to meet my progressive war requirement. I have 3, Truk, New Georgia, and Rangoon. I could have just taken an island and gotten the 4, but I just really, really want to take Rabaul. And I really want to do it in this manner. So I activated these 5. It's going to be the 3rd New Zealand Division, the same 4 that we had earlier, which will give them the +2 bonus because they're attacking in the mixed. The thing that has to happen is that the Americans have to roll a 5. If they roll a 5, then they're good. If they roll higher, they're good. If they roll less, they're going to take the penalty. They're sitting at 5 right now, which is dangerous, and especially if they lose one more. And there would be 2 turns in a row that they would have gotten the progressive war loss. So certainly a big decision, but I couldn't bring myself to not take them on. So it's something that I'm definitely gonna be doing. So it is surprise attack, which I believe still applies in the ground combat, even if it's a naval invasion. So I'm gonna roll this, and that will give us our answer on whether or not they're even going to take it, and then I'll go and look and see if that's a correct assumption. So here's the big roll. This is going to be for a political will point. And it is a perfect 9. No modification needed. Without a doubt, the New Zealanders are going to storm Rabaul and retake all of the Solomon Islands. They will now fall at the end of the turn back into the hands of the Allies with an absolutely heroic effort. So that's going to be 2, which will stay 2, which is enough to eliminate the unit. I will check back to see whether or not the Japanese are supposed to return fire off camera, but that will be enough to flip Rabaul back to the Allies, eliminate 33rd Japanese Army, and the New Zealanders are triumphant, had 2 big moves to push the progress of war over the line. And the Allies are looking fine here, just in midway through 1943. The Japanese will have one more card, and that'll wrap up the turn. I'll probably bring you one last status update, and we'll be done with this. Alright, so that wraps up the turn. I checked, and of course I was wrong. They are rolled always together for the ground combat, regardless of intelligence condition. And the Japanese roll a 2, modified to a 6. It's a 1. 9 doesn't do a hit on 12. So the New Zealanders walk in unscathed, basically. The Japanese used their final card for a China offensive, and that's something that I really have a hard time balancing all of it. And I realize it is a balancing act. As the Japanese, I struggle to even hold on to the gains that I sometimes get playing as the aggressor in the early turns. I don't focus on China enough. And then the same way with the Allies, I spend so much of the opening turns dilly-dallying around, really not just kind of pushing units and counters around. I really should be building the infrastructure in northern India to try and open up the Burma Road. But as it stands right now, it's closed. So with 11 divisions in China, they can guarantee themselves every time that they do a China offensive to move that marker down. So at this point, that's going to be one of the things for the Japanese. If that's their route to victory at this point, they're going to have to stave off the Americans and the Allies and hope that they lose a few more due to progress of the war, and then get China to surrender, and that's going to be, I think, 2 more. So that's going to bring you down to 2. If you lose 1, you get a card that's going to bring them to 0. So that's the route at this point. It's going to take them 4 more turns to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bring them to turn 10 of the 12. So the end of 1944, in order to achieve that goal. And the Allies themselves have kind of woken up to that as well. That China is very vulnerable at the moment with no support from the Allies. The Japanese, I think that's the only way they can win at this point. I don't see, they're not going to take Australia. They're not going to take India. India is gone. At this point, they've just got to hold what they have and try and be a nuisance. They've done okay at reinforcing back along the raid to the home islands. And I've just kind of been reading forums and listening to some of the stuff Mark Herman says on his Twitter account to understand a bit more of the strategy. I mean, I've played this game probably 4 times now. I'm not an expert by any means. I rarely get past the halfway point because it's just so abysmal for the Japanese. But now that I've kind of gotten to this point halfway through that the Japanese aren't toast, there's still a chance, which I feel like is how it should be historically. I don't think they should really be halfway through and think like they're really in control of things unless I'm only playing the Allies and not playing the Japanese, in which case it'd be totally acceptable. But, I think at this point, I think the Japanese kind of should be forced into a corner. So now I have to go through and just finish out the turn. I have to figure out supply for this area here for the Solomons because, or for really New Guinea now because the Solomons are gone. Because they're out of range of a headquarters. So I have to figure out what all that means. They're within ZOIs and all that good stuff, but, if these guys go due to supply, I mean, it's just complete capitulation on every front, and the Allies are going to be able to walk in. So let's hope that that's not the end of the world, but, who knows. So anyways, that's it for this turn. We'll be back for the next one. It'll be do a look here, September-December turn of 1943 up next. Thanks for watching.